Who Watches the Rewatchers, a Buffy rewatch podcast.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Who Watches the Rewatchers. My name's Jarrod. I'm with my good buddy Alan, and we are here looking at and rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Today, we're going to be looking at episode 5 of season 1, Never Kill a Boy on the First Date. How you doing, Alan?
I am outstanding. How are you, man?
Doing great. Today is the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, France, just to kind of time date this for people. So my kids are interested, and I'm not sure if we'll be watching much, but I think we're intending to. How about you? Are you an Olympics person?
You know, I am embarrassed to say that I don't know anything at all about any sports. There was a time in my life when I watched tennis religiously, pun intended. But that day was a good solid 30 years ago, and I haven't watched much sports since, my friend.
Okay, well, fair enough. You do watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
That's right.
So we can talk about that. And in today's episode, we talked last week about how we were in another monster of the week, but that when we got back to season 1, episode 5, we'd start getting back into the bigger mythology episodes. And here we are. This one is it's got a couple things going for it. It's got Buffy trying to go on her first date. It's got a little bit of monsters with kind of a slash mythological religious kind of bent toward it, and we even have runes. So I love anything that wants to bring in some sort of rune. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But how should we kick off on this episode, Alan?
Yeah, so let's just dive right into talking about plot. And every time I bring up a plot point that has something of interest, we can digress. Cool. But before we get started, I do want to make this one observation, which is that I think that this is the first episode that I really felt the influence of one of the shows that Whedon was pulling from, which is called what's the high school drama he pulled from? I can't think of the name of it right now.
Beverly Hills 2.0?
No, my something or another life.
Oh, My So-Called Life. Yeah,
So-Called Life. Yes. I really felt the My So-Called Life influence in this episode.
Okay, cool. Yeah, how'd you feel it? Just because of the desire to be normal and have a date?
Yeah, the dating drama and the interactions with Cordelia and the interactions with Xander. You know, I thought that was all very, very high school drama-y, and really helped push that specific element over the top.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, we do have a love interest right out of the gate. We'll just say his name is Owen.
That's right.
And I, you know, as the show progresses, Owen is somebody who's been interested in Buffy. He asks her on a date to, of all places, the Bronze, and one of the things that Buffy really likes about him is he's sort of different. And as the episode goes, you find out that Owen is interested in Emily Dickinson, and he takes copies of her work everywhere he goes, and he's sort of dark and brooding. And one of my favorites is when Willow says, "I've seen him brood for an entire hour. I timed it."
Yeah, that's right. It's a great line. This episode has a ton of really great lines and only a couple cringy lines. Like, I think that the first season's got some pretty cringy dialogue every once in a while, but this one's actually got some really funny ones.
Yeah, no, I cringe a lot with Owen.
That's right.
But you know, I guess we can get to it as we go. So let's talk about him asking her out on this date, and what stands in the way of the first date. What is it here? Is it Giles being kind of a parental hangover figure?
Yeah, well, I think that what really stands in the way of the first date is some of the mythology stuff that you were talking about, right? Because Buffy kills a vampire early in the episode, and they find what is that they find? Some sort of medallion or rune or something?
It's a ring. Giles has and through a
right.
He's surveying it, kind of like a police detective is trying not to get fingerprints on it, right?
Right.
And Buffy kind of rolls her eyes at it, and he goes, he sees because it's got an ancient rune on it.
Right.
You know, for those who don't know what ancient runes are, there's kind of a Germanic alphabet, Viking from the days of kind of a pre-Germanic language, and if you follow Michael Myers movies, in the middle there somewhere when they get really, really bad, Paul Rudd's in it, in one of them, and there's a thing about ancient runes. I believe sort of in the 80s and 90s and some early 2000s, runes would be used anytime we wanted to kind of drudge up some ancient lore or magical lore or mystery. And though they are very much a real kind of alphabet, this is kind of an era where neo-pagan synthesis is emerging as both an aesthetic and a religious movement in America. And what I mean by neo-pagan and synthesis is that you will start to find more and more new and alternative religious traditions in our culture, and they're pulling on pre-modern, pre-Christian sometimes traditions, whether it's Celtic or Germanic, whether people called themselves witches or Wiccan. And what they were doing is trying to pull on something very traditional and historic, but bring it into the contemporary world, and sometimes synthesizing them. And so sometimes runes are a part of that aesthetic. And I bring all that out because I think Whedon's basically got a sandbox to play with as they create the show of symbols, of metaphors and myths. And in this one, he's got the ancient runes, and he's got like a Southern gospel sort of preachery person. Yeah. It's got it all. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I don't know if there's a connection here, but right after we encounter this ring, we cut to the master who's talking to a bunch of minions, and he's mad about this vampire being killed, and he starts reading this ancient prophecy. Were runes connected to ancient prophecy?
Well, I don't know. I really don't. I actually did a little just cursory research on where runes, if are examples of when we've discovered them in history and archaeology, if they were tied to magic and stuff. I can only imagine that somewhere along the line they were connected to something more mythological. However, I'm ignorant to all of that.
Sure.
What he's reading, and I've wondered what sort of text, holy or unholy text, a vampire, a strong, very powerful vampire would have. But It very much seems like what it is an inversion of a Christian text. So the prophecies have a phrase that come out of a phrase from, like, I think even the King James rendering of the Old Testament. I'm going to butcher it right now, but like so shall it be written, so shall it be done.
Right.
So, which I believe comes right out of part of the tale of the Exodus story and Pharaoh and Moses. So I believe it's a kind of a line that's famous line, but he uses it almost like a refrain, right? About pathetic thing, and for me, it makes me ask, like who is prophesying, right? Who are the greater powers at play for the vampire world? What's the mystical power structure? We don't get to that for a while in Buffy, but this is just tipping the hat that there's something more than the master. There's a lot going on here,
and this specific prophecy is about the coming of the Anointed One. And that's really sort of the undercurrent of this entire episode, and in the process of Buffy and Giles trying to figure out what all this means, Buffy uncovers the symbol in relationship to one of the books in the library, and she says that, she tells Giles that it's connected to something called the Order of Aurelius.
Yes, the Order of Aurelius. Which sounds super cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's about the time when we meet Owen. Owen walks in the library. He's shocked to see Buffy in the library because he thinks of Buffy as probably, she's pretty, so he thinks she's probably one of these other flighty girls that he knows. But he's super engaged with Buffy because he now thinks that she's a serious, potentially as thoughtful as he is.
Never be in a dark place surrounded by musty books.
Yeah, that's right. And he thinks he's offended her by suggesting that she doesn't read, and they have that whole back and forth, and it's very meaty.
It's sort of like a security blanket, you know. Hey, I mean, I did listen to his words throughout the episode, and I thought it reminded me of early Dawson's Creek, where I'm like, this is just adults putting into teenage language words that they think are important or deep, but like that really aren't.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
So, he's really drawn to the macabre and to the dark and to all the things about life that makes our human nature contingent and not necessary, which is like death and decay.
Yeah. The other thing, if I can just say one thing that annoyed me about Owen, because you've said a couple already, so I'll tell you that win for me, is the way he talked.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was an affect for sure. It wasn't just the way he talked; it was an affect. Like he put it on.
It reminded me of Strange Things at the Circle K, dude.
Bizarre things are afoot at the Circle K.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah, but she's not supposed to go because he wants to take her on a date, and he's not supposed to go because of all that stuff, right? Already she's missed out on opportunity because she's patrolling with Giles, and but at the very same time she's making the case to Giles that she needs to have a life too.
Right. And she has another foil for trying to have a life, which is Cordelia.
That's right.
And one of my favorite lines is when they both try to sit down next to Owen for lunch, and Cordelia actually knocks Buffy away from the table with her hip, and Buffy says something to the effect of, "Wow, Cordelia's hips are wider than I thought."
That's exactly right. That crap, it's so good.
Yes.
So good. And at the same time, the stuff's happening with the invitation and Buffy and Cordelia.
Right.
There's a bus that's heading towards Sunnydale, and it all seems very, very bad. Like this kind of trope that you saw in a lot of films and stuff about like people who ride buses into cities, like that could be the element, right? And there is a person on that bus who's sort of a menacing figure. He just looks like a villain. He also speaks with something of what you do think of when you think of more of a rangy or southern drawl, and he's speaking like a tent revival evangelist.
Sure.
And he's talking about righteousness and the unrighteous, and it's kind of scary. Definitely has a lot to do about God's judgment and prophecies. I listened to it thinking that very much the writers were just making a caricature cartoon of stuff they've heard along the way, right?
Yeah, sure, very much.
And then at the same time, on this bus, there's other passengers. You take another child and other different ones, and then suddenly, a vampire sort of walks out in front of the bus, causes it to crash. It's a trap. And then these other vampires who represent the master start killing everybody and draining everybody on the bus, including the preacher-y sort of outlaw-looking guy. He dies.
But I do think that they were trying to insinuate the preacher-y prophecy guy or whatever was the anointed one, because they build.
They were, and his name is Andrew Borba, and that's his character name, because I'm looking it up. And amongst the things that they're insinuating, but by showing a newspaper clipping, he's a suspected murderer. So yeah, it's just that it's not so much spoken about, I think, through the dialogue, but through the telling of the story with what you see, you're connecting this particular person to brutal murder.
Yep.
He's in town. Of course, that's the anointed one of the master. And for those of you aware what anointed means, that when you say the anointed one, I think it can pass for audiences just some more sort of pseudo-religious sort of sounding, like interesting technical stuff. But yeah, the anointed, always a special one. But that concept of being anointed is very much a concept that it has a lot to do with different faith traditions of being set apart for a purpose. When you anoint someone, you're typically putting oil on their head, but it is a marking, a blessing, or a marking of in some sense holiness, or being set apart as unique and different for a special purpose. Right. So the word Christ in Greek, Messiah in Hebrew, it just means anointed one, the set apart one to do something particular for God. So we had this sort of inversion of that. And
yes,
if it's Jesus is holy, then this would be the unholy, and a murderer could be, right? Yep. So you're exactly right.
Well, so while this is happening, Giles has tried to tell Buffy that she can't go on her date because he's read this prophecy and he's done the calculations, and whatever's going down is going down tonight.
Yes, he's the one with the newspaper. Well, he shows up to Buffy's house. I mean, I literally just step back and say, Owen asks Buffy out. She says yes, and now Giles is going to show up at the house, right? And it's kind of odd because there's already Xander and Willow at the house with Buffy. It's some great comedic bits in there because she's getting ready for Owen to show up and trying on things and trying on. She's asking her Scooby pals what they prefer, and of course Willow's being very thoughtful and very,
Xander's trying to sabotage the date, right?
Yes, absolutely. Throw a lot of shade, and it's being. He did achieve so Nicholas Brendon really some funny bits and comic acting with his just demeanor and his body as well. But as Owen shows up, he's startled because there's Buffy and there's her two friends, and then they're trying.
And the librarian.
And then the librarian shows up, and it's like, wow,
take your job really seriously.
Seriously, do house calls, and then that's where you get a lot of that funny. I mean, it goes through the entire date where there's a lot of everyone in the know trying to explain things away so that Owen thinks it's all just normal. It's quite humorous, but yeah. So Giles knows that tonight's the night. He should not have said tonight you can go out, even though he really did. She just moved quickly and Lynn did it anyway. He's got the newspaper, a suspected murderer, and killed on a bus, and prophecies, and so. But she's still going to go on the date.
Now I'm going to back you up for just a second because I have a point about the previous night. So this is actually the second time she's trying to go out on a date with Owen. The first time she's trying to go out on a date with Owen, there's actually a little bit there that's very indicative of something that I think is going to become a trope or a staple in the way that Buffy stories are told. And so I want to mention her. Great. So what happens the previous day is Giles says this prophecy's here, and it's going to happen tonight. I've done the calculations. It's going to happen. And so he says something to Buffy. I wrote it down. Let me see. What does he say? He says something like, we're going to go into battle, right? And then you instantly cut to seeing a scene of he and Buffy sitting in the graveyard bored out of their minds.
That's right. Yeah, right. It was. Is that what you call a smash cut?
Yes.
I think nothing really hard. Yeah, I think that's good.
And this is something that becomes a thing for Buffy, where the line of dialogue is exactly the opposite of the next visual. They do it over and over and over again throughout the entire series, and I think that this is the first time they did it very effectively in the show. Is this particular moment I'm talking about? So because they're bored out of their mind, they don't find the anointed one, or they don't see anybody dying. Nobody's rising in the graveyard. Buffy tries to go find Owen, and there's a little bit of interplay between she and Owen and Angel at that particular moment. No, I'm wrong. That's the next day. When Buffy gets to the Bronze, she sees Cordelia dancing with Owen, and she just leaves. And then it gets to the stuff that we've already talked about.
And that's why she's committed to going. I will say, you think that's stylistically something that happens through this show, and I think it's probably done its part to infect the way I think of telling stories and humor myself. Like,
sure,
like there are just things that influence you, and you sometimes don't even know that that's where it's coming from. Right? That's just right. Our brains are and our social lives are. And I do think that trope is something that it comes across sometimes in the way I plan, like to teach a class or to stand up,
sure.
Build it up like this, and then stop with something completely, the other direction, which is, it's just a comedic trope. But I think this is where it comes from.
Yeah, for me too.
So well done. Like it's always good for attention release. The way it's
done. Right. That's right.
Going to battle and then chirp, 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 chirp.
Right.
And then, so she sees Cordelia, as you said, and then that makes her more resolute. And she's going to go. And now it's time for the second date, and all the fun is ensuing that I've been describing.
That's exactly right. So Giles is deterred, though. He's going to figure out what's going on. So he goes out on his own to try to figure out what's going on with these vampires and the Anointed One or whatever.
Yeah, and it's really good. Later in the show, he reveals, because he's trying to identify with her, he reveals that he remembers the day he found out that he was destined to his calling, right?
Right. Talk about that.
He says, later on when because she's let down later on, right? The whole business will affect her date, obviously.
Right.
And he's feeling bad for her, this human girl that he cares for, this young woman. And, he talks about, I still remember the day I found out I was to be destined to be a watcher, my father and his mother before him. And he was a child. And so that's probably the first time it really is stated, at least in that way, in that clear of a way, that he has a calling too. And so in this scene, he is so concerned about this anointed one and the prophecies pertaining to the master. This is no run-of-the-mill vampire. This is no monster of the week. This is someone to contend with. This is a proper villain that you can't let get stronger, or in this case, to have the master do all the mystical things to get let loose from his prison. So he goes, as you noted, he goes off to, in particular, to the Sunnydale funeral home, which is where these bodies are that were killed in the bus, because he thinks there's a connection. It's got to be a connection. He's doing that while Buffy's at the Bronze with Owen, and where Delia's there, makes it a little, some nice comedic back and forth comments. And then, of course, Angel shows up. Does Angel act like he's been alive for 200 years? Does he act ocean mature? No, he acts like a jealous guy. It's quite funny. I laughed at it when I saw it. But I was so proud of Buffy. I was thinking to myself, she could have tried to have her cake and eat it too, but she said yes to the guy Owen, and she said she's stuck with Owen. She's like, this is my date. She kept putting her, this is who I'm with, and I thought, well, good for you. I mean, she's trying to, because I know that might seem silly, but I remember being in high school, and I remember those awkward experiences being all kinds of strange, you have this moment, maybe you like the person you're with, kind of like this other person too, and so you didn't really want to say because you felt awkward. Well, here she is, letting everyone know she's on a date with Owen. And I think they also let you know that it was her first ever date. Which is hard to believe, but there it is.
Well, it was her first ever date in Sunnydale. She had dated, well, I don't know. I don't even know if the movie is in canon.
Let's say no. And let's just agree no. I don't know. Hey, if this is her first ever date, it's at least in Sunnydale that way. So she's not experienced as a dater.
No, definitely not.
And so she's there, and then later, as the date is continuing, they're having some fun, even with the interruptions. As Angel is there trying to communicate something to Buffy about how she's got a bit more important things to do. He sounds sort of like Giles. Willow and Xander show up, and now Owen's starting to get a little bit kind of weirded out. Like, you guys are everywhere,
right?
And they do that. It's very funny because Willow and Xander are like, "Oh, we're dating," and like, "You guys are dating now?" Like, yeah, we just knew it happened eventually. If
right.
And of course, this is the best friends from childhood who've done the Snoopy dance together since they were kids. And they're ended up, and they're like, "Hey!" And they start trying to give her the signal that something is dangerous. Some danger is happening for Giles.
Exactly.
He's back at that funeral home, and while he was there, he was trapped and cornered, right, by some vampires. Kind of surprised him.
Yep.
And they somehow, I guess what happened was that they, out of being dutiful.
Mm-hmm.
Buffy Summers' house, they said, we've got it. Well, because it was Willow who said, we have to follow Giles. Mm-hmm. So they follow him, and they see that he's trapped, and they stick their head in the window and whatever. It's like Giles can't easily get out, but they can talk to him, and he goes, go get Buffy, and that's what they're doing.
She's got a creeping thing.
Do you remember the ruse, what they tell Buffy in front of Bowen? That
I remember that they say something like how there are people at the funeral home that Buffy needs to meet, or something like that. I don't remember exactly how they phrased it. But I did say again.
It gets Owen interested.
It does get Owen interested, and Owen's interested in seeing dead people anyway because of his interest in Emily Dickinson, right? And that's why he wants her, or Emily Dickens. She's good too. But the one line that I wanted to mention that's related to what you're asking about right now comes up in just a few moments when they're at the funeral home. Buffy basically barks some instructions at them and then goes off to find Giles, pretends she's going to the bathroom, and Willow says something like to Owen. Willow says she wants to make sure there are no guards, and then Owen says back to her, "Good thinking." And Xander looks at Willow and says, "Good thinking." I think that this is another important idea that gets recapitulated in Buffy a lot, which is the idea that you have the same line of dialogue meaning different things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good pickup on that. That's
there's another one like that. Both Giles and Owen call Buffy a really strange girl at some point during the episode, and they mean, again, totally different things by it.
They do, and it made me feel cringy.
That's right.
I guess, earlier I corrected myself. I called her a girl, and I said a young woman because, and I see her in this, even though she's younger than she is now as an actress, she was a young woman, and I can get it from Giles, but
right.
See her contemporary of age, it doesn't make it is a little crazy. There was times, and if I can come up with a quote, I'll say it. But there's times where something Owen says or some dialogue goes a certain way, and I just said out loud, "This episode was written by a man."
Oh, the one that's the worst for me is when right after he asks Buffy out for the second date, and he gives her his watch.
Yeah.
He says something to the effect of, "I'll pick you up at 7. It's when the little hand is in between the 6 and the 8 or whatever."
Oh yeah, because she couldn't say why.
Yeah.
And Xander was like, "You can't say your tires popped or something." And then she goes, "Oh, my watch broken. We don't have any clocks in my house." And he's like, he's kind of cutely saying, "I've got that problem too." And then, of course that is a very funny moment because he goes, "Here's my watch," and he gives her a pocket watch.
Right. Yeah, this gorgeous antique-looking pocket watch,
like
juxtaposed with Xander's watch. Did you catch that?
The Tweety Bird or something.
Yeah.
And it made him insecure. His own little watch, it's so cute.
That's a terrible line of dialogue, but it does have that thing. When I was watching this, actually, I'll tell you, I'll bring this one other little thing related to that line of dialogue I said earlier, which is the whole "what a strange girl" thing. Giles says that in relationship to Buffy trying to blow off hanging out with him to go vampire hunting that night. And that scene, when it happens, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's the first legitimately bad scene I've seen from Buffy, because in screenwriting technique, there's this idea that if the emotion of the scene doesn't change in some way between the beginning of the scene and the ending of the scene, it's a useless scene. It's just expositional. So I actually had in my notes, exposition scene, first really bad scene I've seen from Whedon, the series, right? Because he didn't have any exchange of emotional energy. It just went, it had the exact same emotional tone. But then I realized the reason that it got left in was to make the Owen line later make sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let me ask you this question. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't know the answer. You said, first bad emotional bit from Whedon or whatever.
Right.
And this is Joss Whedon's show. This episode, he's a showrunner, which means he's the boss. But this is directed by David Semmel, and it's written by Rob De Hotel and Dean Battaglia, I'm seeing here. So, I mean, obviously the art is still under the Whedon world shut.
For sure.
As a showrunner, and then maybe they all do it differently, how much oversight would he provide for the script?
So in later seasons, he has way less to do with it. But in this first season, I know for sure that he did a final pass on every script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't know that, but I know that that's not true in future seasons. I just know that it's true for the first season because it was short enough for him to be able to do it, and he had little enough going on that he had time to do it.
They're suggesting that maybe he let the exposition scene go for the sake of the line.
Yes, for the sake of the joke.
For the sake of the joke, yeah. So, okay, because in the TV and movies, I cringe when it's always better when they do the exposition in a clever way, right?
Right.
But sometimes it is cringy when you're like, oh, they're just getting us up to date. That's all they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the rule in contemporary screenwriting is that there has to be the emotional energy of the scene has to reverse or double down. So if the scene starts off happy, it needs to end sad, or it needs to end ecstatic, right? And so there was no emotional change in that particular moment, which is what I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get it. That's interesting. Because I find when you do come across stories that have just expositional scenes, as a viewer or a reader, you're looking at it and you go, it doesn't ring true because that's not how we communicate.
Right.
So it just kind of comes across as a little bit strange, alien. It's like,
yes.
Like that. Okay. Yeah. Well, while they're there, because now Buffy has got to go try to save Giles, and so she basically says to Owen, "Hey, look, there's two, because Owen said earlier in the episode, which I didn't say, nor did you say, that he said, I feel like there's two versions of you, or you're like two different girls, like you're the pretty blonde, basically Valley girl, but then you're also deeper." And then she goes, "Hey, you remember how you said I'm like two people? Well, that's kind of true. And there's one of me that's basically having a great time, and I got to go deal with something. But when I come back, that one's going to be here with you, right?" And he seems sort of dumb. He just kind of got a slack-jawed look in his face. They go, "Okay." And she heads off, and she's going to go with her friends, and she's going to go try to help Giles.
Right.
You get to the funeral home, which is in the middle of a cemetery in the dark, and she begins to go in and start trying to suss out the situation, only to be surprised by an unwelcome visitor.
Right.
Now, mind you, she could have been helped by Angel, but did Angel help her in this? I mean, he was with her in the bronze, knowing he was afoot. Did he help her?
Nope.
I don't understand why they didn't do that, and maybe they didn't want to focus on their relationship yet. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me if he's going to be involved and helpful. I mean,
I'll give you a theory, but know that this is me being an apologist. It's not a real thing, right? My theory is that if Angel shows up and starts like actually doing combative stuff, he's going to vamp out, and she's going to find out that he's a vampire. So he's trying to avoid fighting in front of her, so that she doesn't find out he's a vampire.
Okay, I like that theory. That's just the way it is. I like it. I have to tell everyone, I'm always hating on Angel's character. When I was watching this in high school, as it's going, I loved Angel's character, and I thought he was far more interesting than Spike. I grew older, realizing that Spike was a far better character. I mean, it's a better character that has the most complete story arc in the entire story. I've written and published about it. We'll talk about that at the time. But when I was just a wannabe brooding teen boy, I thought Angel was pretty cool.
Yeah, sure.
But here I'm kind of confused. So
no, I agree with you. Again, I said that for the sake of trying to come up with an idea for what might have been happening. But the reality of it is, at this point in time, Angel is a terrible character.
Yeah, just kind of Johnny come lately.
Yeah, man.
He leaves it too early. But okay, so she's in this funeral home. She's starting to like become the general of the situation, and then there's the unwanted character of Owen. Owen could not let well enough alone. He really wants to see a dead body.
Yep.
And so he decides, this is cool. I'm going to show up too. And so Buffy has to now comedically deal with him, deal with her friends who are in the know but are still basically almost fully helpless, and then try to also Giles. So she shoves them in a room and tries to get them to barricade, and it cracks it. She goes, barricade the door in case any, guards show up.
Right.
don't let them in, barricade the door. I love it because if you watch them, first off, I think the door opens outward and not inward. If you look,
yeah, right, yeah, right.
So they're barricading it with couches, and they're throwing like pillows on it and like light shades from lamps on it. Like it's like all matter, but they're just throwing everything at it. And I even thought to myself, why are they doing all of that? Like, is it just to be funny? And I think sometimes it's just for the sake of acting, because I was watching Owen a lot.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of frenetic movement when they're together.
I actually have a theory about this. I do. Okay. I think that for like this little 5-minute sequence in this Buffy episode, they were channeling Scooby-Doo.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Because what happens in the sequence is the 5 members of the gang split up. 2 of them are trying to solve the mystery, and 3 of them are trying to avoid the monster. And they're putting a bunch of stuff against the door that's the wrong direction, just like it would happen if we do. I actually think that's what was happening.
I think your theory is great. It's just another theory you bring to the table today that I'm just going to go ahead and say is absolutely right. Because it does make sense. I mean, they're the Scoobies later on after all.
That's right. That's right.
He references things. But I was just thinking about their frenetic energy, and my theory about why their frenetic energy, why they were always kind of jostling about, was simply because, for the sake of telling this story through physicality, that all that movement just made it seem harried and tense. And I know later on, when they film later on seasons, they have the magic box and they're walking through the town. I know that the town is so small, and to achieve it, the scale that they need, the actors were forced to walk with short strides.
Right.
So sometimes I think they're acting in a way to make it seem like something more is going on. Like it's just
totally. And on that same note, I wanted to point out one thing, which, and I should have said this when it was more pertinent earlier in the conversation. We see the graveyard a number of times in this episode. The graveyard is actually in the same like warehouse lot that they shot everything else in. Like they did this entire series basically in a warehouse, and we're going to see that exact same little bit of graveyard over and over and over again through the entire thing. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about, where they have to make short strides and everything because they just don't have a lot of space to shoot in.
Can I tell you a personal anecdote? Okay, so I worked on my PhD for almost a decade, right? You do this research, start writing. I moved across the country, and at some point you hit a wall. I mean, a lot of stuff happens in your life, and it's harder and harder to get it done.
Sure.
I started hearing about game theory and gamifying things for your own potential. So I decided to try to make a game out of my dissertation. And I became known as Jarrod the Thesis Slayer.
Nice.
One of my very best friends who he and I bonded over horror films and our mutual love of Buffy. He was my watcher. And weekly he would come to my house and we would go on patrol. When we would go on patrol, we would go and walk and talk about what I was working on. Our favorite place to go on patrol was a cemetery not far from my house, where several of my predecessors in my ministerial job are buried. And we'd walk the cemetery and we would talk. And then he would give me challenges, and that was the work I had to get done. And then he would give me a point system and then I was leveling up, and the point system would win me awards like, I get to have a cigar or something that I could, if I get this done, right? So not only did I channel Buffy, but when we went in patrol, we literally walked through cemeteries and thinking about it. So I had in my mind those scenes from that one little cemetery they built for that back lot, and how they walk and talk and carry on their lives. So anyway, that's just...
I love that. Yeah.
So they're there, and they're, Buffy's dealing with things, and Giles is dealing with things, and they're looking for the dead body they assume must be of the anointed one. And so they're in that one part of this would be more like a morgue, where this would be not a funeral home, but it is nevertheless convenient that most people don't know about mortuary sciences. It's convenient for their story.
Certainly.
But it's a wall with all of those sliding bins that the corpses lay in, usually for autopsy prep and so on and so forth. And they have some great scenes where the camera's on the inside and Giles and Buffy are pulling them out one at a time. And
yep.
I thought that was a really great camera work for storytelling. Then cutting back and forth to where Owen is with the other Scoobies, and he's kind of got that slack jawed look and his kind of dull gaze. He's like no longer interested in the door and what could be on the other side of the door that's barricaded. There's these curtains all around. He opens them up, and his eyes are bright because he's looking at something, and he goes, "Whoa!" And it does not reveal what he's seeing for a bit. Meanwhile, back on where Buffy and Giles are, but because Buffy's having to run back and forth, Giles is now hidden away to protect himself from the vampires, and Buffy's got to find him. Where is he hidden himself away? In one of these sliding drawers on top of a corpse. And it's a great line. I wish I wrote it down. I didn't write down any notes. I'm just going from memory. Giles comes down and he goes, I hid in here with, this poor chap, or this, I was the guest of this chap. And, his hospitality.
Exactly. In this very British way.
Very British way. Yeah. And it was cool.
I remember that there was a great line here from him, but I don't remember what it was either. It was something where he was trying to sound brave, and then she called him out on it or something.
Yeah. It was good. And Anthony Stewart Head delivers it perfectly.
Yeah.
We cut back to Owen and the gang and what he's looking at. It's now revealed. It's a corpse covered up by a sheet on a gurney, and he can see the arm of the corpse hanging beside it.
Yep.
No explanation as to why it's there and not in one of these sliding bins. No, I mean, it just seems like people left their work for the day and moved on.
Yeah, right. 5 o'clock. Time to go.
Working knowledge of a mortuary is not good here, but very quickly you start to see that this is not a dead corpse; it's the undead.
Yep.
Person sits up, uncovers themselves, and it is, in fact, Andrew Borba, the murdering, traveling, preachery, sort of prophetic, scary, religious guy.
Right.
Has come to town. And back to that theme, it's unfortunate to me as a clergy person myself, but
in the South,
how easy it is to make a creepy, scary religious person.
Yes, sure.
I mean, there have been creepy, scary religious people.
I mean, the most famous one probably Poltergeist, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much to pull from in real life, and then I think sometimes it's the real life bad guys, the people who are charlatans, and then I think sometimes it's just the world, right? The world is different when you think about what a priest or a pastor or something. What do you think about their life is if you're not in that world, you probably think of it and imagine it more exotic or different than it really is, right? Like maybe they're surrounded by relics and tomes, right? It just makes you feel, it engenders a sense of there's this kind of a little veil, even if there's not intended to be one, and you can fill the blanks with anything kind of mystical, spiritual, and therefore spooky. So, but he seems to be one of these real nasty ones, right? Well, now he's all vamped out. He's shirtless because he was dead, but of course he's not fully naked because that wouldn't play well. But nevertheless,
right.
He comes up, he sees them through the glass observation window, and he headbutts it, and he's excited because now he's got dinner.
Yep.
He's going to come in and try to drain the blood. And what happens? How do they get out of this one?
I don't honestly remember. I remember that there's a whole lot of scuffling and fighting, and I remember that the vampire eventually, Buffy is eventually distracted when the vampire is coming for her, and he ends up being able to grab her by the throat.
Yes.
When Owen comes up behind her and hits the vampire. But what happens before that? I don't remember.
That's just it. Buffy comes in. She can hear it shatter, and she comes in. And what ends up happening is Owen gets knocked unconscious,
That's right.
And he does hit him with this metal pan, and he hits him in the most. It's just not a very good fight scene. He hits him very weakly, and he gets knocked out. He's kind of in a daze, and
Buffy rages. You killed my boyfriend.
My date, and Buffy, and she slides him into a furnace and kills him. Mm-hmm. And then when Owen wakes up, he's kind of like, "Did you see that guy? He tried to bite me. What a sissy!"
Right.
Like, he doesn't understand, but he also calls him a sissy. And then he asks, here's another part where I thought a dude wrote this. He's like, if I weren't knocked out, I would have totally taken him, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to help him save face because he's got to be the tough.
Right.
And I do want to point out that, so in this case, the vampire dies not by a staking, not by sunlight, but by a fire.
Right.
Purgatorium. And I also want to point out that both Giles and someone else, it might have been Buffy, but Giles and someone else use a cross.
That's right.
Earlier in the show. And it's a very, it's a cross that is so 1990s. It was not very nice looking or ornate.
Right.
But I thought, what does it mean in the universe if they're in fact repelled by crosses? Well, with a simple short step in logic would mean that there's something holy about the cross because of what it represents.
Yep.
There's all kinds of theologies that would go into that. But here at this point in time, there's nothing to be said except for the cross does something to repel the vampires.
Right.
Yeah. And now we fast forward to the next morning because Owen is left that night from the funeral home going, I need to go home. This is strange. I'm going to go by myself. Like, he doesn't even want to be with Buffy. He's a little wigged out, as they would say. But so Buffy's sad, like, she's bummed out. And the next morning at school, Owen comes up to her, but this time he's not wigged out himself. He's excited. And he's like, let's do that again. Kind of disturbing because he for him, he was just excited by the adrenaline rush of it all. Mm-hmm. Like, what are we going to do tonight? We'll go out at 3 a.m. and pick a fight, Mm-hmm. And Buffy doesn't like that. And she doesn't want to have that sort of relationship. She doesn't want to put anyone in danger. But I thought it was so bothersome because here's a guy who's proving that it didn't take much for him to really be drawn to some darkness.
Yeah.
Chaos. I think of it kind of like the movie The Hurt Locker. These guys who do these high flying, high risky, like bomb detonation, they're people who dismantle the bombs, and they come back from war, and they're these adrenaline junkies. They have this post traumatic stress and the desire. They need that drama. And it's like, boy, this is happening already. This isn't healthy.
No.
So she turns him away.
Mm-hmm.
And turns to Giles, and Giles tries to comfort her by telling her about his burden too, about that. Right. I had a calling, and what he wanted to do for a career instead of being a watcher. Do you remember what he said?
I don't remember what he said. What did he say?
You want to be a fighter pilot, or perhaps a grocer?
That's right. That's right.
One's like very, very thrilling and exciting, and then the other one is like so mundane.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I thought, oh, that'd be so cool to be a fighter pilot. And I also thought, oh, it would be so cool to be a grocer. But not today's grocery. They're like,
not today's grocery. That's right.
Yeah. But so they both also think that the master is, the master. It ends with saying, our big bad, the master, the one we've been worried about. He must be having a pretty bad day, right? Because the anointed one, this Andrew Borba, this killer guy, preachery sort of guy, he's gone. We burned him. He's been roasted, toasted, and burnt to a crisp.
Yep.
But then we have another cut, and the cut goes back to the master's den.
Yep.
Underneath Sunnydale, and it does the reveal. He's welcoming the anointed one. It's not ever been Borba, but it's just the young boy who was on the bus with Borba.
Yep.
Listening, and he has these dark eyes.
Yep. And that character is going to be around for a little bit, but shockingly doesn't really amount to much. We'll talk about that when it all goes down.
That's right. That's right. So, as I mentioned in our last episode, I pull up one of the good things about the Wikipedias for these episodes is that they pull up that Vox ranked each episode based on the 20th anniversary reviewing.
Okay.
They ranked this one 115 out of 144. So it's better than last week's episode, but it's not high up there. They saw it, and what they're saying is that there's the quote from the Vox article, calling it the kind of sweet, wistful little story that Buffy first cut its teeth on while it was still figuring out how to go mythic and grand. I thought that's true.
I think so. But what I like about this episode is that I think that there were a lot of things that they were. You can see them finding their way in this episode.
Yes, you can. Can. In what ways would you say you can see him? What were the little?
Well, I've already mentioned a few. Like I think that this idea of really playing into the line that represents something's going to happen, and then the reveal of whatever it is being exactly the opposite of that. I think that that's something that becomes a staple of the series. I can't wait till we get to season 4, and I'm able to point out all of the amazing times this happened. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, my favorite moment like this is when Willow says, "Come in" to Spike when she's in her dorm room, and Spike walks in, and you think he's about to like totally eviscerate Willow, and then there's a smash cut, and the next time, and then it's the whole scene where Spike was impotent, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't able to buy it. It happens to all the guys. But and we'll talk more about that when we get there. But I think that there are a handful of moments like that in this episode. I think that the idea. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I also thought the humor was better. So the scene with Xander and the girls and the boy, I thought that was what I saw when Xander was having his comments, his under the breath comments, looking in the she's changing.
Yes.
His watch. I thought Xander was acting the acting, the writing, and the performance by Nicholas Brennan was operating at a level that was like a seasoned show, whereas the other kids were operating at like a subpar kind of
right,
like, and they were great at the same time. So yeah. Well, very cool. Looking forward to continuing this journey with you, my friend.
Absolutely, man. All right, next time.
All right, anything else? We're all good?
I think we're good.
All right, friends. All right, we're going on to the next episode. We'll see you then.